Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. Pardon my voice today, guys. Still a little bit hoarse, but feeling a lot better. We're on the mend, and hopefully in the next couple days we're at 110% because time is of the essence, and I'm sick of lumbering around and wasting time. There's so much to be done and so little time to do it because I do believe we're entering a new dark age, both literally and figuratively. Every time I think that, well, maybe I'm just overreacting to the news cycle, things aren't as bad as they seem, it's just that SHTF elements have kind of compounded almost to a new support level from which things get worse in the next 48 hours, and that's where we're at right now. We are entering a new dark age. Now, one thing I want people to bear in mind when you're trying to estimate how bad this is going to get and when it is going to turn a corner is just remember that this war has been going on for 2 months. Most world wars last years. Well, they take years to build up and they take years to be fought. World War II was a great example, of course. It took many years, basically throughout the whole 30s to build up, and then it took 6 years to be fought and to have everything sorted out. Even after Pearl Harbor, it was 3 years until the war ended. 3 years of war. We've been conditioned by Hollywood to think that you should just be able to throw 50 battalions of troops together, no problem, put them in the boat, send them into this place, and that's that. And, supplies will just magically fall from the sky, and these things are going to happen overnight. The zombie apocalypse happens 48 hours, it's spread around the world type thing. Well, we've seen with the pandemic, that's not the truth. These things are much more prolonged than we've been conditioned to believe. But things are progressing towards that end, and we're just seeing it happen in slow motion. That's why it's important that you pace yourself with this, because it'll be very easy to burn yourself out as we're in this age of consequences, as things begin to culminate. Like I said, I thought that, I go away for a few days, I figure, well, things will be better when I get back. The markets get redder and redder. The prognosis gets worse and worse. The war only is intensifying on all fronts. And we need to remain vigilant. This doesn't not mean enjoying your days, enjoying your free time, enjoying your family time, but it's knowing that we are in the storm and it's likely only going to get a lot worse. Now, where should we start today? Russian state TV, one of the mouthpieces, the guy who's known as the mouthpiece for Vladimir Putin, Dmitry Kizelyov, in the usual Russian state TV fashion, has basically threatened the United States with nuclear annihilation. Now, this nuclear saber rattling has been getting closer and closer to the United States as the U.S. has, they'll say or they'll take responsibility for something, then they'll walk it back. Biden saying that, well, we got to get rid of Putin, and then they walk it back. Them saying that, yeah, they use U.S. intelligence to sing the Moskva, and then they walk it back. Maybe we shouldn't have said that. So, the Russians aren't stupid. They know what's going on. They know they're fighting a war against NATO via proxy. Even one of the U.S. Congressman, Seth Moulton, said, we're not just at war to support the Ukrainians, we're essentially at war, albeit somewhat through proxy, with Russia, and it's important that we win. And this is why Dmitry Kizelyov, who is the mouthpiece of Putin, basically said it's obvious that the U.S. does not only aim at restricting Russia, but wants to destroy our country completely, to cancel it in modern terminology, if you prefer. And if you didn't know, Biden basically, they recently passed an act. I think this was in the Senate. Is that where this was passed? But it was like 417 to 10 votes in Congress. And it was the Lend-Lease Act, which basically allows them to lend an unlimited amount of weapons to Kiev, which if they don't pay back, who's going to get stuck footing the bill? It's going to be the U.S. taxpayer, because there's no guarantee that even in 30, 40 years, especially if they lose, and that's the thing, If they lose the war, who pays it back? Think about it. Anyways, what this means is that they've basically got a blank check for the war machine. This thing is only going to escalate, guys. Now, and for this reason, because of this, Russian media and their nuclear saber rattling has been intensifying and being directed specifically at the United States. Remember, in that recent propaganda piece they put out where they were threatening to wipe away the UK in a tsunami induced by a 100 megaton nuclear warhead or a nuclear drone or submarine or something like that. Now they're talking about that only with US in the spotlight. Okay? So whenever they're asked about whether or not they're going to actually use nuclear weapons, they always go back to their nuclear doctrine. So Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Alexander Grushko followed suit. They always leave the option for nuclear weapons open. And he says that we have a military doctrine, everything is written in there. And this is what people often reference, even though it's so ambiguously written that it's almost useless. I'm just going to say it. It's virtually useless. So I think we all need to just not rely on this as a measure or metric of whether or not the Russians are going to use tactical nuclear weapons. I think it's just going to boil down to they're going to use them when they feel that they have no other options. So, just had a call coming in there. I needed to stop it. And basically, one of the criteria, if you really want to go by this doctrine anyways, for what it's worth, is if the existence of the state is endangered after the use of conventional weapons. And that's really the main one. There's several other criteria, like if ballistic missiles get launched against Russia, if Russia gets nuked, of course they're going to use nukes. If there's attack on Russian critical infrastructure that is in some way required for them to launch their nukes, then they will also justify a nuclear response. But the big one that everybody's always focused on is the existence of the state is endangered, which it very well may be. Now, a retired Russian colonel, Mikhail I'm going to butcher that name if I even try it, Hodoryanyak says, let's imagine the drums are playing and general mobilization is announced. How soon after the announcement of the mobilization can we send the first regiment of fighter jets? We will reach a new year. And this harkens back to what I was saying about the timelines for war. You don't just say we're going to mobilize the entire army and do it overnight. It takes months, if not years. Okay? We have no reserves, pilots, or planes. Therefore, mobilization would offer very little. Now, this is what he's saying. You got to remember too, Russia is, I'm not sure if this guy is like still living in Russia or not, or if he's like a defector or whatever the case might be. Regardless, we try to tap all sources here so that we can get a good picture. I can tell you there's a lot of BS on both sides right now. What was I saying? Yeah, Russia's a huge country, so they have a lot of border to defend. So it's not like they can just, take all of their military and focus it on Ukraine, which is why they've had to be very calculated and use an invading force, which on paper should not have even been able to achieve what they've achieved so far. Anyways, if we order new shipbuilding tonight, when will the first one be ready? In 2 years? This is the problem of mobilization. If we aim to create a new Chariot division, when will it be ready? I would say that at least it would take 90 days and would not be equipped with modern weapons because we do not have the modern weapons in stock. Sending people to fight with old weapons in a 21st century war in a fight against NATO would not be right. Of course, we have to make up for our losses in terms of personnel, weapons, and equipment, but this must be done through defense industries to build modern, advanced equipment. Recruitment will not solve these issues. So he's saying that even if the Russians were to do some full-scale mobilization it would take a long time. And that time, of course, is of the essence. And this is why Congress is really trying to get that money and that aid in there, because they know that it's kind of make or break right now. Because Russia has been gaining a very, very strong foothold in the Donbass. There's a lot of disinformation on both sides, okay? Like, for example, the Snake Island thing. Now, if you go on some of the extremely to the point of detrimental, I would say, news agencies which are trying to, give Ukrainians a reason to keep fighting. I understand it, but it's to the point of misinforming people. There was one video they released. It was footage. Ukrainians released helicopter footage of Snake Island, or helicopter being blown up on Snake Island. And apparently that was a Ukrainian helicopter that was blown up. So we don't even know, I say apparently, okay? The fact of the matter is they tried to retake Snake Island and they failed to take it. This is an island off I believe it's not too far from Odessa, which is a city which has been under heavy bombardment in recent days as well. A lot of mercenaries supposedly have been staying there, and that's their kickoff point. But so the Russians claim that the Ukraine had lost 4 aircraft, including attack jets, 4 helicopters. They also lost 29 drones. Now, this is what the Russians are saying. So the truth is somewhere in the middle. Either way, the losses were pretty intense. And but what I'm saying is that you're not getting the complete story. So do not rely on these anecdotal reports. And I've been saying this all along. This is not to say that the Ukrainians are not, making wins and pushing the Russians back in places, but it's not as sunshine and rainbows as they're making it out to be, particularly in the Donbass, where based on the reports that I've been getting, Ukraine has been taking very heavy losses. And as I've always said, you'll know when the Russians are losing the war when the lights go out in Kiev, because they could easily do that. And the fact that they haven't done that yet is just baffling to me. I don't know what it is that's preventing them from doing that. It must be, there must be something to it, because basically Kiev has now said that it will not relent on the breakaway republics. Under no uncertain terms will they let those 2 breakaway republics have their own sovereignty, have their own governments, and work with Russia. They're not letting Mariupol go. They're not going to let anything go. So this can only go one place, and that is to World War III at the end of the day. And the fact that they're still there makes me think that maybe that's Russia's last potential off-ramp. Because if you don't think that you can't cut the power to a place with a few cruise missiles, then you're deceiving yourself. And I don't know why this is not even talked about. Like, it's almost as if they're not considering it as part of the country anymore. So some of these moves, some of the strategy the Russians are employing right now is just confusing to me. If anybody has any ideas as to why, and some people will say, well, it's because they can't, but no, they can. They could easily overwhelm any missile defense system that's in place in Kiev, could easily be overwhelmed. So it's not that. It's got to be something diplomatic, political. There's got to be more to it. Anyways, we talked about the Land Lease Act. So basically we have a blank check from Biden, and we all know who will be stuck with the bill. It will be the taxpayer if and when they cannot pay it back. So that means that there's going to be a lot of weapons flowing to Ukraine. And the only place that's making the chips that go into those weapons is Taiwan right now. And they are apparently have been surrounded by Chinese warships in the last few weeks, doing more and more exercises. So China is watching what is going on. Now, back to the Ukrainian front. Big stuff is happening. A leaked document reveals that Lithuania-Poland Joint Peacekeeping Corps has been preparing to enter Ukraine. I don't know much about the history, but I know that there's a western part of Ukraine which was historically Polish, and that's where they're thinking they're going to start making their move. Okay, the document was sent to the president of the State Border Service of Ukraine, Serhiy Dainik, stating that the entry of the forces will take place May 22nd to 24th. I hate dropping dates, but this is a leaked document, okay? The joint Lithuania-Poland peacekeeping squad will consist of 9,500 soldiers and 279 units of military equipment. Now, I will say this. Ukrainians versus the Russians, now that the Russians have had to meet that stiff Ukrainian resistance, I don't think NATO can bring anything that's going to approximate that level of resistance. Because not only are the Ukrainians trained in the Russian tactics because of the whole Soviet era stuff, they just know Russians intimately. So the fact that the Russians have been able to win, or are winning, or making progress, as slow as it may be, they're beating the cream of NATO's crop, is what I'm saying. The Ukrainians are the best fighters NATO has. Now, this is not including, of course, the U.S. military, who has some experience in that urban combat, arguably against forces which were much less well equipped. Okay, this is a whole different war. Anyways, the authenticity of this document has yet to be confirmed. All right, but what this has caused is Belarus to respond in saying that they're going to deploy military forces in 3 areas near the southern border with Ukraine, which of course is causing Ukraine to want to move some of those forces from Kiev that were guarding the city up near the Belarusian border. So Minsk is forced to respond to the concentration of Ukrainian and troops, and this whole leaked document saying that there's going to be this Polish and Lithuanian Peace Corps incursion into the country. Now, it'll be interesting to see if Russia is going to intervene if Poland and Lithuania send in these peace corps. I think, though, that is going to create a new potential, a flashpoint of escalation, because recall, if Poland and Lithuanian troops start to take some heat, then of course that brings NATO into the fight. I'm not really up to speed on what's happening in Moldova, but I'm sure it's likely not that good. I know in the past few days there has been some more explosions in Transnistria, I believe, but I don't know much about that, so I can't really comment much on it. Belarus is also going to conscript the Russians to help them build missiles. And remember, we're talking about global war timelines, meaning that people are preparing to have this war, waged on for years, potentially. And that's what we need to bear in mind. And we're going to see the energy prices skyrocket to reflect that. That's why I believe that the market has been in a tailspin lately. It's been in free fall, and because the writing is on the wall. Okay, I'm running out of battery here. Now, also today, this news just came out. Kiev cites force majeure in Lugansk to halt third of gas flow to Europe. So Ukraine, a lot of the pipelines of natural gas go through Ukraine, okay, and they've obviously not wanted to turn those gas flows off. And they've been in this situation where, okay, we are facilitating the empowerment of Russia's, natural gas industry, but at the same time, we don't want to cut off Europe because they need the natural gas. Ukraine today officially stated that they will be turning off some of the natural gas. So I don't know much about that. That was breaking news when I got it. But keep your eye on that, because we're going to see gas prices skyrocket in the coming days ahead. Millions of UK homes face no heat this winter, Power Chief warns. Scottish Power CEO Keith Anderson told the Daily Mail on Monday that with gas prices skyrocketing in the wake of the conflict in Ukraine and Western sanctions on Russia, household energy bills could rise to $2,900 pounds, I believe that is, by October, with some 10 million UK homes potentially unable to afford heating. Guess what, guys? When you cannot afford to keep warm, what's the best way to keep warm? People rioting in the streets. You can have two options. You can sit in your home and freeze to death, or you can keep your core temperature up by rioting in the streets with Molotov cocktails. Guess which one people are going to choose? Elon Musk says he will allow Trump back on Twitter. I think it was a morally bad decision, to be clear, and foolish in the extreme, Musk said, calling it a mistake that alienated a large part of the country, did not ultimately result in Donald Trump not having a voice. Far from censoring the president, he pointed out that the morally wrong and flat-out stupid move by Twitter actually amplified his voice among the political right. So what we might see happen is countries and Congress and, whatever other politicians and legislative channels are going to start, cracking down on big tech. And I think Elon Musk is going to realize this. Unfortunately, he's going to realize that that's where the ultimate power lies. And I think that's why you have all of these, what do they call them, where, they get Mark Zuckerberg and he's answering the questions of all these congressmen. That's why they have that, to kind of keep them in check and let them know that, you might think you're in control, but it's the deep state that's in control, okay? And I think that this could potentially backfire on Musk in terms of countries banning Twitter. And I think it's good. I think less censorship is always better, but, the politicians of the world may not. And as I said before, tech giants lost $1 trillion in value over the last week alone. Okay, Apple has shed $220 billion in market capitalization. That is not including the inflation on the money that the value of the stock is actually measured in. So when you factor that in, they've lost a lot more. So investors, like I said a month ago, you need to get into commodities because everything else is crashing, and investors are dumping Apple for Campbell Soup and those food stocks. Remember when I said that probably more than a month ago, probably like 45 days ago? More traditional stocks such as food companies, Campbell Soup, General Mills, JM Smucker have been on the rise, as investors seem to be preferring safer parts of the market because they know the food shortage is coming. Anyways, guys, the best way to support this channel, okay, is to gear up at CanadianPreparedness.com, because we don't do the whole sponsored by thing. I totally understand why channels need to do that. I choose to create my own preparedness survival store that sells premium survival and prepping products, stuff that's not junk, stuff that's actually going to keep you alive in a time of crisis. And I do it to my own detriment, because I could easily have sponsors on every single video that I make. They message me all the time. Hey, I'll give you $2,500, $3,000 just to name drop this name. And I just don't do it. Okay, I would much rather you get something in return.